The feast that starved a continent. The images were unbearable. Rows of skeletal children with distended bellies, eyes wide and hollow, skin stretched taut over protruding bones. Mothers cradled infants too weak to cry, their lips cracked under a relentless sun. The world watched, hearts shattered, guilt gnawed, and wallets opened. Celebrities wept on global stages. Billboards screamed for donations. Concerts raised millions in hours. Within weeks, container ships groaned under the weight of rice, powdered milk, canned meat, antibiotics, and bundles of second-hand clothes stamped with Western logos. Trucks rumbled across borders, escorted by armed convoys, banners flapping proudly. From the world to those who suffer. First, it worked. The starving ate. Fevers broke. Wounds healed. Villages that had resigned themselves to slow death suddenly pulsed with life. But life in this new form was borrowed and poisoned at its roots. Because where aid flows, so do vultures. Warlords diverted entire truckloads at gunpoint, selling sacks of donated grain in neighboring markets for cash to buy AK-47s. Local militias posed as distribution volunteers, siphoning medicine into black market pharmacies. Thugs looted warehouses under cover of night, their spoils appearing days later in dusty bazaars under the guise of discount emergency relief. Half of every shipment vanished, not into mouths, but into profit. And yet, even the portion that reached its intended recipients carried a hidden cost. Why buy maize from the village farmer when a white truck dumps 50 kilos on your doorstep for free? Why pay the seamstress down the road for a child's dress when bales of donated t-shirts tumble out of NGO tents like manna? The local economy didn't just slow, it collapsed. The baker shut his oven. The pharmacist locked his cabinet. The weaver sold her loom for firewood. Farmers watched their harvests rot in fields while aid trucks rolled past, unloading food grown continents away. Worse still, the incentive to plant the next season's crop evaporated. Why sow when sustenance falls from the sky? Why raise chickens when powdered eggs arrive by the ton? Across once thriving rural belts, fields lay fallow. Goats went untended. Irrigation ditches clogged with weeds. The knowledge of generations, the timing of rains, the rotation of soil, the balance between herd and pasture, began to fade like ink in the sun. And then came the population surge. With death held temporarily at bay by foreign sacks of grain, families grew larger, not out of joy but strategy. More children meant more ration cards, more aid parcels, more survival. Where once a mother might have spaced births by years, now she bore children in quick succession, each one a claim ticket to the endless stream of free provisions. The land, already brittle from drought and overuse, groaned under the weight of bodies it could no longer support. Within 2 years, the crisis returned, deeper, wider, more entrenched. But this time, it wasn't just drought or war causing starvation. It was dependency. It was the hollowing out of self-reliance. It was an entire ecosystem of survival dismantled by generosity that never asked what it destroyed in the name of saving. And as the cameras returned, zooming in on new faces just as gaunt, just as desperate, the cycle reset. More guilt, more concerts, more billions, more containers, more warlords waiting in the shadows with open trucks and hungry grins. The world meant well, and that was the tragedy. The architects of hunger. Behind closed doors in Geneva, New York, and London, the machinery hummed with quiet efficiency. Not the machinery of aid, but the machinery that profited from its perpetual failure. Program directors in tailored suits reviewed quarterly reports not of crop yields or clinic reopenings, but of donor engagement metrics and media impressions. They knew the truth. Sustainability was bad for fundraising. Recovery was a threat to budgets. If villages truly healed, the cameras would leave. The celebrities would move on. The donations would dry up. So the narrative was carefully curated. Always the child with flies on her lips. Never the farmer watching his market stall collapse. Always the warlord clutching an AK-47. Never the NGO warehouse manager quietly selling surplus antibiotics to the same warlord's cousin. The story had to stay simple. Evil out there, goodness flowing in from the civilized world. Complexity was the enemy of empathy, and empathy was the engine of revenue. Meanwhile, on the ground, the rot deepened. In towns once known for their cotton weavers, looms gathered dust. No one planted flax or raised sheep for wool. Why bother when containers of discarded fast fashion arrived weekly? Labeled hopeware, local tailors became aid distributors or thieves. Some became both. In regions where herbalists had treated fevers for centuries, clinics stood empty, their shelves bare except for expired donations no one knew how to use. Traditional knowledge wasn't just ignored, it was erased, deemed primitive in the face of Western benevolence. And the warlords? They adapted brilliantly. They learned to mimic humanitarian jargon. They formed community relief fronts, with glossy logos and rented offices. They hired fixers who spoke fluent English and knew how to file paperwork that satisfied auditors thousands of miles away. Aid didn't weaken them, it armed them, quite literally. Every stolen sack of rice bought bullets. Every diverted medicine shipment funded new recruits. The more chaos they sowed, the more aid poured in. Starvation became their currency. Even the rain seemed to conspire. Intensified droughts, yes, but the deeper drought was of agency. When a village no longer believes it can feed itself, even a good harvest feels like a fluke. When children grow up watching food arrive on trucks rather than sprout from soil, they forget the taste of self-reliance. The psychological shift was total. From we grow to we wait. Population continued to climb, not because people wanted more children, but because aid systems rewarded large families. Ration cards per capita. Blankets per head. School meals per enrolled child. Incentives twisted survival into strategy. A mother's love became entangled with a ledger. And the land, stripped of rest, stripped of trees for firewood, stripped of nutrients from abandoned fields turned to dust, could no longer breathe. Then came the moment no one spoke of in donor meetings. The aid began feeding the very crisis it claimed to solve. More starving mouths, more collapsing markets, more desperation, more headlines, more guilt, more concerts, more billions. The loop tightened like a noose, and the architects smiled gently at galas, accepting humanitarian awards, whispering to journalists about the long road ahead. They weren't evil in the cartoonish sense, they believed in their mission. But belief, untethered from consequence, becomes dogma. And dogma, dressed in compassion, can destroy continents. Because the cruelest lie of all wasn't that help was given. It was that help was enough. And the cruelest truth? No one in power wanted it to be.